Howdy, guys, and welcome to night 67 of Big Brother Season 23's Overnight Feeds Recap. And welcome to Cliff Notes from outside the Big Brother house. A good Sunday to y'all. I hope y'all have had a fantastic weekend. Certainly been busy inside the Big Brother house, so let's get right into it. First of all, just as a recap, Kyland is the HOH. He put Tiffany and Hannah on the block on Friday, with Tiffany as the primary target. And yesterday we had not just any veto competition, we had BB Comics competition, which is always such an iconic event. Can't wait to see the episode, actually look at the comics that we saw. We got a little bit of idea of what they all were that we'll talk about, but they had BB Comics yesterday. Incredibly important competition for Tiffany being the primary target. And the winner of BB Comics this season is Kyland. Kyland wins HOH and he wins veto, which means he has complete control this week. He put up Tiffany and Hannah. Is he going to keep the noms the same? I would expect so. But we got a lot of time between now and tomorrow for the veto ceremony. And there's certainly been some campaigning going on to change that. And we'll be talking about that as we go through this as well. But for right now, Tiffany and Hannah on the block. Kyland holds all the power in his hands, and we'll see what happens. Now, in terms of the competition itself, apparently Kyland finished in about 11 minutes, is what I'm hearing. Just as a reference, during my season, Nicole Anthony won our BB Comics competition. She finished in a little over 5 minutes. So Nicole really flew on her competition. Sounds like this season, everyone's times are a little bit slower. Maybe the way the set was set up. We just don't know until we see the actual competition. But Kyland finished in 11 minutes, won the competition. Again, I don't think he's going to change his nominations. Tiffany is almost certainly going home, which is rough because I think Tiffany has been one of the best strategic players in the game this season. I think she's done a wonderful job. A few missteps here and there, but I think she's done a wonderful job. But sometimes the best players don't make it to the end of Big Brother, as we've seen in years past, right? And it looks like that may be the case with Tiffany. Now, we haven't seen the comics yet, but based on some of the conversations that took place last night, we do have some ideas about what each comic was. And so I'm going to throw those out real quick to y'all. We had the Wizard of Ozza, which is kind of cool. We had the Explorer, Xavier, and apparently referencing that domino competition where he had to pick up all the punishments and all of that. So the Explorer, Tippy Toes, talking about Tiffany, Mr. French Fry, and apparently had some ranch dressing, some soft drinks, things like that around. So Frenchie got the Mr. French Fry, Big Z with him snoring, which he seems kind of appropriate. I think that I'm looking forward to see that one. Lord of the Latrine for Derek X, and poor Derek X. He goes through this whole season. Everyone loves Derek X, and his comic is him being Lord of the Latrine. He may have wished for something else, but it's his comic. We get Oceana Hannah, or Oceana Hannah. I think that's what it was. Some kind of play on her last name of Chata, like clam chata. Get it? Yeah. Okay. So we'll see what that looks like. We have the Kylander, a Highlander, but wearing a kilt. So Kylander. Okay. We'll see what that one is. Sarah Breath, no idea what that one is. Claire Bear, we'll look at that as well. The Denier for Brittany. And then we've got the Zombie Flight Attendant. Yeah, that's Brent. It's got to be Brent, right? And then we had the Bikini Genie with Alyssa. That'll be a fun to look at. And then the Buckle. And apparently the Buckle is Whitney's comic, and it's referencing something about that top that she was wearing that she said she works out in. She sat around the living room. Everyone said, I would not ever wear that to work out on. Well, apparently that one little conversation led to her comic of the Buckle. And then we've got the Surfer, which is Travis. Now, the one that's missing is Christian. And I went back and looked a little bit to see if I could find what Christian's comic was. I haven't found it yet. So he had one. We just don't know what it is. So there you go. Once we see the actual pictures, it'll be a lot more entertaining. Now, one thing just to mention, someone, I think Ozza came out and everyone said, well, you were in that diary room for like 2 hours. And apparently Big D said the same thing, that he spent a lot of time in the diary room. Just as an FYI, the diary room sessions after Big Brother Comics, BB Comics, take forever. As we get in there and we are asked questions about every single one of those comics, all 16 comics. You're asked to give some little comments on, little jokes and things like that. They want you to come up with, things that would be funny, and that way they can take all of that and take edits out and have all kinds of little conversations. So you'll see that on the TV episode of all of us, well, not us, all of the house guests talking about the different BB comics, and so it takes forever in the diary room. So we had a lot of that going on last night. All right. So let's talk about the live feeds. We haven't even gotten to the live feeds yet. Let's talk about the live feeds. First of all, after the competition, feeds come back. Everyone's sitting around the table. It was a long veto competition. 4 or 5 hours. It took all afternoon. But we get back. They're all sitting around the table, eating different meals and things like that. And a lot of talk about the competition itself and who did what, who liked what comic, and all the things that you would expect. Ozza did ask for a moment of silence to remember the 9/11 attacks, and I'm so glad that they did that. Every year where people take a moment to reflect on that, it just made me feel good to see Ozza did that. And so they all took a moment and thought about the outside world and 20 years ago, and so they did that. So props to you, Ozza. They're talking about the comics. Tiffany is wondering if the artists are told what to draw. A little FYI for y'all on that. Yes, they are. It turns out my comic was drawn by a guy named Tom Wynn. And I've seen different artists talk about it. That basically they're given a theme, they're given a title, so kind of some direction about maybe what kind of comics it should be. And then as they go through the whole drawing process, apparently they're in some kind of collaboration, coordination with the Big Brother producers all the time. So yeah, the artists do incredible artwork, but it's Big Brother that comes up with the comic itself. All right, there is talk about the next HOH. They're hoping it's a slip and slide competition since we haven't seen that competition yet this year. Probably not, though, because we know what they don't know, that it's going to be a double eviction. And I can't imagine that the next HOH would be a slip and slide if it's live on TV, where it's difficult to tell just how long the competition may take. That's a longer competition for us just on TV to be watching the full time through. So I don't think it's going to be a slip and slide. And if we don't get it on the next HOH, well, then suddenly you don't have a whole lot of people left to compete for the remainder of the HOHs. So this could be a season where we actually don't see the slip and slide take place, which I kind of hate to see. I love the competition, but I'm thinking we may not see it. We'll see if I'm right or not, but I think it may not happen this year. All right, we got Hannah talking to the cameras. Now, Hannah knows that Tiffany is the primary target, but that doesn't mean that she's still not worried that things could happen, or that and if nothing else, I think Hannah realizes that even if Tiffany does go home this week, Hannah's still on the outs, that she's losing her tightest person and she feels like she's going to be alone. So she's talking to the cameras about what she can do. She says that she's going to propose a final 2 to Kyland and a final 3 to Kyland and Xavier. She kind of uses this thing, if you can't beat them, join them. So she wants to try to get a little bit tighter with those guys. And she's going to tell them that she was tight with Tiffany, and Tiffany just kind of clouded her judgment, and she did some things that she kind of wishes she hadn't done, but she was just under Tiffany's influence. I'm not sure that's the best approach, but we'll see if it works. Hannah has a gift of speech and manipulation. She's done pretty well in the past, so we'll see how successful she is. But she's trying to really wanting to throw in with Kylan and Xavier and stick with those. I'm not sure it's going to work, but we'll find out. All right. We've got Xavier and Big D talking a little bit. Xavier's saying, look, if Kylan is going to backdoor anyone, well, first of all, if you've got 6 or fewer players, there's no more backdoor going on. A backdoor is when you don't get to a chance to compete in the veto and fight for your game, whatever. But Xavier is saying if Kylan's going to backdoor anyone, then it'll probably be himself, Xavier, that he's targeting. But Xavier is also saying, but I kind of trust Kylan. I think we're okay. I think we'll be good. And I agree with that. I think Kylan's going to stick with the guys, at least this week. I think he'll stick with the guys until you get to Final 3. And then he has said he wants to go against the strongest, which potentially would be Xavier. I'm not sure if he'll stick with that pledge quite then. I could still see Kylan at the very end taking Big D instead. But I think for right now, it's definitely the guys' alliance is probably stronger than anything else we've got going on. Big D is telling Xavier he kind of expects the noms to stay the same. But we know Big D. He worries about it, and he'll say differently a little bit later. There's talk about what kind of social media following they'll have after the show, what events they'll do together. be invited to. Big D's excited about life after Big Brother, and I hope he has all kinds of adventures and fun opportunities. It is cool once you get out of the house. All right, Big D and Hannah are talking. Hannah's wondering why everyone suddenly wants Tiffany out. Big D saying, well, we haven't seen eye to eye in forever. You know that Tiffany and I really haven't been that way. And he says, and Ozza, I don't know if Ozza's really going after Tiffany or not. I'm not sure. So he's kind of trying to make it not look quite as much like Tiffany's a big target. But she is. But Big D is also, remember Big D said he thought the noms would probably stay the same. Well, he's telling Hannah that he's worried that Kylan will use the veto on Hannah and put Big D up instead. But Hannah's saying, yeah, it doesn't really matter since Kylan has made it pretty clear Tiffany is a target anyway. So whatever happens, I think we're probably okay. More talk about the veto competition. Now, I mentioned Kylan took about 11 minutes to win. Apparently, Xavier took about 20 minutes to finish the competition, and Tiffany timed out. Tiffany spent a lot of time trying to figure out what she could have done differently. At one point, she said she had it done in 7 minutes, but she didn't realize she had one mistake that she never could figure out. I'm not sure if even now if she knows the mistake she made. So she timed out. The times this season were incredibly long. I think mine was like 12 minutes or so. So I'm feeling a little more impressed with my times based on what I'm hearing tonight. But yeah, so we get a little bit more talk about the times. And here's the big shocker, the big surprise. Apparently, and they've talked about a few times throughout the evening, apparently Big D came in second place. Apparently he was just behind Kylan and almost won this thing. So who would have thought that with Big D and BB Comics? I don't know. Maybe he's just been throwing all the comps. Maybe Big D is the comp beast and he's going to turn it on. He's going to win everything from now to the end of it. And we just weren't expecting that. Okay. Yeah, you never know. Well, we kind of know. Anyway, yeah, Big D got second place. Tiffany and Hannah are talking. Tiffany and Ozza talking. Tiffany she's I was going to say kind of apologizing. She's straight out apologizing to Ozza for not working closer together with her, for maybe shutting her out at times, for being a little too prideful and too certain that she was right. She says, it's not that I hate apologizing. I just hate being wrong. And so she's making all kinds of apologies to Ozza and talking about the fact that in the entire house, Ozza is the only person that's been playing an honest game and how much Tiffany respects that, and that she and Kylan have been going at it and everything while Ozza's just playing this honest game throughout the whole time. It may be too late, Tiffany. I know she's subtly campaigning for votes ahead of the veto ceremony already, but it may be a little too late for Tiffany to bring Ozza on board at this point in time. We got Hannah talking. She's claiming everyone's campaigning a little bit over the night, even if they don't call it that. Hannah's talking to Big D, and I think Ozza may have been there as well. She said, "Look, I'm a joker. I sleep in the same room with the two of y'all, so I'm a joker just like y'all." Again, trying to buddy up with him a little bit. And Big D said, "No, you're not a joker. You've actually won something. The only people who can be jokers are those of us in this house who haven't won squat so far. So, yeah, get out of here. You're not a joker, Hannah." I thought that was pretty funny. And I hadn't thought that. Jokers are Big D and Ozza, haven't won anything together. I think the fact that both of them haven't won squat kind of pulls them together for a little bit. They can sympathize, they can empathize with each other. But again, we've got Hannah trying to get a little tighter with those two. And again, in anticipation of the votes that are going to be coming up on Thursday. Big D's talking. He's saying he would prefer sit next to someone that would be easy to beat in the final two. He says, I know some people maybe would prefer to go up against someone who's really good at the game, that deserves to be there and all that. Not me. I'd rather sit next to someone who's easy to beat. That is smart on Big D's part. Again, he is subtly promoting people to take him to the final two, suggesting, hey, take someone that's easy to beat. And, I haven't won anything, so just keep that in the back of your mind. So he's doing a little campaign as we got Big D and Xavier talking. Xavier is thinking that Ozza would probably target Kylan and put up Hannah as a pawn if she was to win the next HOH. Both of them are agreeing that if Tiffany goes home this week, if either one of them, Kylan can't. Oh, yeah, it's not Kylan. Big D and Xavier. Both of them saying if they win HOH, they'll put up Hannah and Ozza. So, again, the guys' alliance kicking in and staying strong. Big D is turning around saying if Hannah wins this thing, she'll put up two guys. That'll be who she picks as HOH, and I think he's probably right. In fact, Hannah at one point talks about forming these alliances with Kylan and Xavier and all that. And she also says, now, whether I honor, this is talking to the camera, she says, whether I honor him or not, yeah, probably not, but I'll make the promise. Yeah, I think Big D's right. Hannah would put up two guys if she had the chance. Big D is telling Xavier he really needs to win next week and take out Hannah. And then it's just three guys and Ozza left as the final four, which, think about this, it gives Kylan a fantastic chance to win that final HOH and guarantee a final three. If Xavier wins the next HOH and he gets Hannah out the door, that means the following week, the only people that can compete for HOH are going to be Kylan, Big D, and Ozza. So again, it really sets Kylan up in a pretty good spot to have a good opportunity to make it to this final three. Just something I thought about. Xavier is telling Big D that he's not going to throw HOH. At this point in time, he's through throwing competitions. He's going to fight for HOH and win it. But at the same time, he'll be perfectly fine if Big D wins. He'll be happy to let Big D have it. He wants Big D to have it. He's gonna compete. But if Big D wins it, Xavier's going to be incredibly happy. I bet he will, because then if Big D wins, Xavier feels pretty safe that Big D isn't going to send Xavier out the door. He's going to go after the women. And that means that then Xavier could play the following week in that final four HOH, which is kind of one of the important ones. The winner HOH in that final four doesn't determine who goes home. That's the veto winner. But if you win that final four HOH, it guarantees your slot into the final three. So, yeah, Xavier would be perfectly happy to have Big D win that competition. All right, let's see what else. Big D talking to Xavier some more. He's saying that, look, we were the first two members of the cookout, and we were the ones to start making the relationships with the pawns in the house. And Xavier says, yeah, and he said, Big D says, and I'm the one that came up with this idea about coming up with the pawns and each of us having a pawn. And Xavier saying, yeah, Tiffany's claiming that she did that, Big D. And he said, she may, but I'm the one who came up with it. It wasn't Tiffany. I personally kind of think maybe it was Tiffany, if I recall. I could be wrong, but I think it was Tiffany. But here's the thing. Forget who was or wasn't behind that. From Big D's standpoint, why are you telling Xavier something like this? Why are you telling him something that you may want to use as part of your final two argument when you're sitting in front of that jury arguing about why you should win the money? Don't give anything to Xavier. Just keep saying, I don't stand a chance against you. I got no argument. I haven't won anything. Let Xavier be confident when he goes into that final two, and then blindside him. Then throw out the stuff that I'm the one that came up with the pawns. I'm the one that came up with the cookout plan. Don't tell Xavier right now, because he's an attorney. He's going to remember this. He's going to be prepared to argue against what you're going to argue. So I think Big D's talking a little too much right now, just on the off chance he does make it to final two. All right. We've got it from the other direction as well, though, because Xavier's also talking about Kylan to Big D, and he's saying, look, Kylan doesn't have a whole lot of good relationships in this house, and he hasn't really managed jury well at all. So why does Xavier tell Big D this? Don't make it sound like Kylan can't win a jury vote, that he may not be able to win in front of anyone else, because you don't want to give any reason for Big D to potentially want to drag Kylan into a final two as opposed to Xavier, just on the off chance that Big D's the one that gets to make that final decision. Don't talk about others' weaknesses. Don't talk about your strength with people that you may have to be arguing with on down the road in that final two vote. All right, finally, almost finally. That's a lot of stuff to talk about today. Kylan and Xavier talking. Xavier's throwing out an interesting idea. He's throwing out the idea of pulling Hannah off the block in exchange for Hannah promising not to put Kylan up if she wins HOH, which is a good idea. But would Hannah honor that promise? I don't think so. But they're making the idea, throwing the idea out there. But to take it a step further, Xavier's saying, if you pull her off and get her to promise, then you should be safe. But let me go talk to Hannah, convince her that I'm the one that convinced you to pull her off the block. And that way you'll be safe for pulling her off the block. And maybe you'll be safe because I'm the one that convinced you, and we're this tight trio and all of that. So it kind of feeds into this idea that Hannah's already had of wanting to form a final three with these two guys. So we'll see. We'll see if there's enough trust built up between these three that they would actually do that. Again, I kind of think not, but it's an interesting plan that's been put up there. I do think this. Would Hannah, if she won HOH, send out Kylan out the door? maybe not. Would she protect Kylan and Xavier both? I don't think that's the case at all. I think one of them would be her target. And so if she makes that kind of promise, I just don't think it's going to be honored. All right. They're talking about it a little bit more. They figure that the worst case scenario is that if Hannah and Ozza say that Hannah gets pulled off the block, Big D gets put on the block by Kylan as a pure pawn. They figure the worst case is that then if Ozza flipped on them, so suddenly Hannah and Ozza voted out Big D, and Tiffany, that Tiffany and Hannah would then come after Xavier and Kylan, so you'd have the two women versus the two men. I don't think that. I think, yeah, it's a worst case, but I don't think that's a good case at all. It's a good reason to keep the nominations the same if I'm Kylan, in my opinion. But Kylan's saying, yeah, I don't think Ozzy would flip on us, though. I just don't think she'd do that. I agree, but why take a chance? Oh, we got Tiffany and Kylan talking. Tiffany is kissing up to Kylan, figuratively, not literally, for those of you who are wondering, but she's really kissing up to Kylan. She's saying, look, I need to be humble. My game is dependent upon you. I've got no one else to turn to except for you, Kylan. I've just got to admit that and embrace that and realize it. And Tiffany's saying, if I stay, I'm going to be everyone's target. You know that, right? Just like every other Vicky has said so far. And she's also warning Kylan. She's saying, if I go home, you have got to get Xavier out of this house if you have any expectation to win. So she's still trying to create a little division between Kylan and Xavier, just on the off chance she can take advantage of that on down the road if she stays. Kylan is really kind of non-committal. He's saying, look, I'll have conversations before making a decision. Yeah, he'll have conversations. He'll have a lot of conversations. He'll have long conversations. There's going to be a lot of talking over the next 24 hours or so. But Kylan's saying, we'll have the conversations. We'll see. All right, and then finally, I know we've talked a lot of things tonight, but finally we've got Big D and Kylan talking together in the HOH bed. Big D's basically throwing all the women under the bus, talking about why every single one of them needs to go home first and all of that. He also, though, makes a mention. He says, look, I've done too much work not to make it final two. Yeah, all right. Everyone's got their opinions. He said, I've done too much work not to make it to final two. But having said that, I want to make it final two, but I only want to lose against you, Kylan. But that's it. So he's basically putting it right out there. Kylan himself for the final two. He's happy to see Kylan walk out the door with the money. Has said the same thing to Xavier previously as well. So I think Big D knows he's probably not going to win this season, but he would love to be sitting in the final two chairs, regardless of who he's up there against. And then finally, Big D is incredibly excited. The lights get turned off. He's amazed how dark it is in there. And I didn't realize it, but this is the first night Big D has ever spent up in the HOH room spending the night. So congratulations to you, Big D. I wish it's because you'd won an HOH. Hadn't happened yet, but at least you get to experience a little bit of what the HOH room is like. So he and Kylan spend the night up there. And again, everyone trying to get tighter with everyone else, trying to develop those relationships and such. You really need to have developed them a little bit before this point, because now it's just a little bit of desperation. It's tougher to trust someone when you know that people are in desperate positions, but everyone's making the effort. And that's what we've been waiting for. We've been waiting for everyone to start playing the game just a little bit harder and more seriously, and we certainly have that. So there you have it, guys. Lights went out at around 4:30 or so, maybe a little bit before that, but they were up fairly late. But again, lots of conversations that took place. We'll see. Today should be a fairly light day. Some more campaigning I fully expect, but the key is going to be tomorrow, the veto ceremony. We'll see if Kylan uses that veto or not. If I was a betting man, I'm going to say he's not going to use a veto. He'll keep it the same, and Tiffany goes home, but you never know. All right, guys, y'all have a fantastic rest of the day. I will talk to y'all tomorrow morning. We'll figure out what happened overnight. Until then, SKD 143. Here's my friends. Bye.